Hey everybody, welcome to episode 16 of the Vinyl Fetish Club, where we talk about vinyl, and I'm doing it by myself tonight. Andrea is downstairs doing some art or something, so I'm here all by myself up in the vinyl act, but it's a special episode for me, something I've wanted to do for a while. I am going to give you the top 5 concerts of my life. I've been to thousands of shows. I worked in the music business, if you count like small clubs and giant venues. I've seen them all. I've seen the Stones. I've seen everybody you wanted to see, from, you know, Soundgarden in a tiny club to the Stones at Leeds. I've seen a few shows. So I thought I'd do. I was thinking, like, oh, these shows I've been to, how could you ever rank them? And you could do a top 10 or a top 20, a top 200. I'm going to give you my top 5. I'm going to shrink it down to the top 5. And I'm going to, first of all, before I talk about the top 5, I'm going to give you a couple ones that aren't on the list, on the top 5. And they're on the list, but they're not on the top 5. So this shows you how massive this list is, this top 5. Nirvana, 1991 at the Masquerade Club in Atlanta. Not on the list. That's when Smells Like Teen Spirit had just come out and moshed right in the front of the show. Didn't make the top 5. Kiss, 1977 on the Love Gun Tour at the peak of their supernatural powers when they were gods among men, with explosions and elevating drum sets and Gene Simmons puking out blood. I was there. It's not on the list. Elvis Presley, 1973. My very first concerts my parents took me to when I was 8 years old. It was amazing to be in the room with him. He was an actual living being, not just the guy from Viva Las Vegas. There he was, and I was looking at him. I was breathing the same air as him. Elvis Presley. I saw Elvis Presley. Not on the list. Shows you how old I am, but it's not on the list. It almost made it. In fact, it was there and then it got jostled off. So let's do, these are shows that I was most kind of out of my head at and excited to be at and kind of think about over and over again. So let's start with the list. You ready? At number 5, number 5 is Patti Smith. Oh, she is a goddess. So important. So I wish I would have seen her in the 70s. She stopped touring through the 80s and into the 90s, and finally she started touring when I moved to Portland. And she would be in Atlanta, where I'm from, and I'd be in Portland, and I'd go to Atlanta and she'd be in Portland, and I kept missing her, and it was just this, when am I going to see Patti Smith? She's such an important figure in my life and my kind of creative life. And finally in 2001 in Portland, Oregon at the Crystal Ballroom, I got to see her. I was there before the doors opened. She had no opening act. So I was there when the doors opened and got there long before the show, pressed against the stage. And when she came out, it was the most mind-bending, euphoric. I remember somebody trying to kiss her toes at that show. When she played Gloria, I ripped my shirt off as I was just in some kind of Romanesque Dionysian orgy. I was so in love with it. And she had a kind of compilation CD that came out in 2002 called Land. And there's actually a recording from the Portland show. It's her reading Allen Ginsberg's Howl. And you can hear me screaming in ecstasy on this recording. I'm on a record with Patti Smith. I've got to meet her and love her, and she's still great. So Patti Smith, you are at number 5. At number 4 is Jeff Buckley. Jeff Buckley, 1991. And here's the story behind this one. I knew about Tim Buckley. He was this cool, kind of hippie, groovy guy that died. He was on the last episode of the Monkees. And I just liked his sort of spacey music. And I got a call. This is when I was working in the management for Driving and Crying. I got a call at the Driving and Crying office saying, hey, Jeff Buckley, this guy is Tim Buckley's son, is coming to town. He's got a new record out. He's a singer in his own right. Can you help book a show? And I set it up in a little coffee house. I thought coffee house sounds like a great thing. So there's this coffee house in Atlanta called Homage Coffee. And I set up the show. I really had no idea what to suspect. He came in with just his electric guitar, wearing a fur coat, in Atlanta in the fall of 1991. He had this CD out, and that's all he had. It was just an EP, Live at Cine, which is this little club in the East Village in New York, and just opened his mouth, and my jaw dropped. I could not believe this guy. And he was playing Jimi Hendrix songs, he was playing Dylan, he was playing Led Zeppelin, but he was also doing his own songs and doing Nina Simone jazz riffs, and I was transformed. I became like the biggest Jeff Buckley fan after that. In fact, a few years later, he had a show in Atlanta at a time when we usually had a drive-in and cry-in benefit, and I actually moved the drive-in and cry-in benefit so I could go to the Jeff Buckley show. Don't tell the drive-in and cry-in guys this. And then Jeff Buckley ended up moving the show to the time I moved the benefit, so it was all for naught. But I did get to meet him a few times. I get to hang out with him. And it was so tragic when he died. He was just a real credit to the world of music and music fandom. He interpreted it all. But that show was just so insanely powerful. It's just like you could not be the same after seeing Jeff Buckley perform. Okay, that was number 4. Number 3. Number 3 is the Ramones. But not any Ramones show. I've seen the Ramones several times. I saw them, for the first time I saw them was in 1978 with the Runaways opening, playing in a place where it was like wrestling matches in Atlanta. And then I saw them in 79 at the Agora Ballroom. There's this very famous picture of that show, and my head is in the front. There's a 15-year-old boy just banging my head to the Ramones show. I saw them a whole bunch of times, but the best time was 1984 at Emory University. We got the Ramones to play at our annual Halloween ball, and I was literally Riff Randall from Rock and Roll High School. I got the Ramones to play at my school. They were touring for this great album, Too Tough to Die, which is their like kind of harder punk rock album, which was so great. And it was a private event for Emory students, but I knew every punk rock kid wanted to be at that show. I know if I was not an Emory student and Ramones were in my town, I'd want to be there by any means necessary. So I set up this sort of underground railway to feed all of these punk rock kids in through the side door so they could see the Ramones. And of course, when they came out and played, all those punk kids were slam dancing and moshing, and all the Emory kids thought it was the apocalypse. And the show was amazing. It was great. I remember every second of it. I felt so proud, but it was a little bit of a riot. At least by university standards. And at the end of the show, there was an announcement, would Randy Blazak please come to the stage? Because all these punk kids were saying, I'm a guest of Randy Blazak, I'm a guest of Randy Blazak. And the dean freaked out. I got called into the dean's office and almost expelled from Emory University for running all these kids into the show. But it was worth it. I didn't get expelled. They had a great time. I got to be Riff Randall and have the Ramones play my school. They didn't blow it up, which is good. Emory's a good place, but they blew it up that night. That was insane. Number 2 is a big one. Number 2 is the biggest of the big, because number 2 is Live Aid, the summer of 1985 in London. I was not at the Philadelphia one, that was the crappy Led Zeppelin reunion. I was in London, right at the front of the stage. In fact, there's a picture of Bob Geldof, who organized it, and if you look right past him, you can see my blonde head right in the front. It was amazing. It was David Bowie, Queen, U2, Paul McCartney ended it. There were all these rumors that the Beatles were going to reunite with Julian Lennon. Style Council, I finally got to see Paul Weller and Sade and just everybody you ever wanted to see in one day. The Who played. I mean, everybody played. Princess Diana was there with Princess Charles. It was so great to see them. The whole world kind of came together. It was also happening in Philadelphia, so there was a moment when the Beach Boys were being beamed in live, which is kind of a satellite first to be able to have the world connected to feed the starving people of Ethiopia. Incredibly emotional. I got a ticket at the last minute and was right at the front for the whole thing. Jumped up and down for like 12 hours and then passed out after that. That was one of the most amazing things to experience, the fact that I was there for Live Aid in 1985. Not as amazing as number 1. Number 1 of all the concerts I've been to in all my life, which is a lot. Everybody you know, I've seen them. I might even been backstage. Number one isn't a surprise to anybody that knows me because I talk about this show quite frequently. It happened on April 29th, 1985, Atlanta, Georgia, at the Omni. It was U2 on the Unforgettable Fire Tour. Now, I'd seen U2 many times, including before that. I saw their very first show at the Ballroom in Atlanta in 1981. Played at like 20 people, maybe, including me. I met Bono on that show. We kind of developed a friendship. And the summer of 1984, I was living in Dublin, and Bono and I were spending some time together. I was with them while they were recording the Unforgettable Fire album, and hanging out backstage at Bob Dylan concerts, and that was kind of our connection. And they played in Atlanta on the tour for the Unforgettable Fire, and they do a thing. It's kind of like this anybody can be a rock star bit that Bono did each show. All you need is 3 chords and the truth. And so they have this thing where they pull somebody out of the audience who can play guitar, and they get to, you know, jam with U2. I mean, they still sort of do a version of this on their tours now. And he pulls this guy out of the stage, and he had these Billy Idol gloves on, takes them off, and it turns out he can't play the guitar at all. He doesn't know any of these chords that Bono's telling me. And Bono looks at me. I just was down in the very front, and he just looked at me and said, "Randy, can you do this?" And so, how many times have you been at a concert where you just imagine you being up on the stage, like that you are now in the band? Like, I used to imagine bands, tour buses would break down in front of my house and they would come and play in my garage. Like, there was a moment where Bono pulls me out of the audience. I'm looking back at the crowd that I was in, and I'm now on stage with the band, guitar strapped on. He's telling me the chords. We're going to play Bob Dylan's Knocking on Heaven's Door, pretty straightforward 4 chords. I can do this. I remember thinking, I'm in the band. I've always wanted to be in U2, and now I'm in U2. And I remember thinking the carpet looked like a living room, like we were just going to jam in an apartment in Dublin. The lights were so bright I couldn't really see the crowd, and we were listening to it on the monitors, so I couldn't really hear them. So we're just playing Knock, Knock, Knocking on Heaven's Door, and I'm on the guitar, kind of trying to rock out, and then they go off the stage and just leave me on stage all by myself. I do a little Gene Simmons like tongue wag, I think, and then they come back out and we're just fully rocking on, and then Bono returns me back into the crowd. The girl that I was hoping to date at the time was with me, just looked at me like, "Who are you?" And I had that moment, and for years after that, people would stop me and be like, "Aren't you the guy that played with U2?" And everybody thought, all my friends thought it was a setup since I had known Bono, but I was just lucky enough to be in that spot at that time to have that moment of going from the fan to the band. And there will never be a moment as great as that. Every year on April 29th, I say a little thanks to Bono, St. Bono, for giving me that beautiful moment at that amazing concert that was a dream come true. Of all the shows I've been to, that one is it. There's a great picture of us playing together, and I cherish it. The house burns down, I saved that photo. So, those are my top 5. What are your top 5? Let me know what your favorite concert is in the comments below. I would like to say, and one of the reasons I'm doing this is to encourage people to go out and see live music, support live music. So much of experiencing music now is sitting in front of your laptop watching YouTube videos. If something special happens at a live show, you just are there with everybody in the groove, screaming, yelling, feeling the vibrations, the bass drum, the bass, the roar of the grease paint, the smell of the crowd. You cannot have that experience sitting in front of your computer. I'm sorry. You need to go out and see a rock show. Come on, kids. Let's go. Go out and see live bands. You never know who it's going to be. Go to clubs. I went to a club here in Portland one Tuesday night, Barbati's Pen. There was a little band playing. There was nobody there. They were called the White Stripes. Jack White's band. Very soon after that, they became one of my favorite bands in the world. There was a little club in Atlanta called The Point that I was at too one Saturday night. Pearl Jam, right when they first came out, played to about 100 people. You know, close as you can imagine. If you're going to see a big show, get there for the opening band. Sometimes the opening band is somebody you're going to be fanatical about later. I saw the Police play at the Fox Theater in Atlanta in 1980, and the opening band was REM. They just had a single out at the time, but of course they became REM. So go out and see live music, and let me know what your favorite band is. We'll be back soon with Andy here with another normal episode of Vinyl Fetish. Like, subscribe, love, rock. No, wait. I don't have arthritis, I promise. Rock. See you next time.
Oh.